Hello, everybody. How are you doing? It is Friday evening. Whatever you are up to, you are so welcome to this space. This is our regular Friday evening opportunity for you to come inside Circle, our virtual circle that we've created, which is just such an amazing place to be, full of amazing people who are all on this spiritual pathway and all interested about learning about all different types of spirituality, mediumship, and hearing from some wonderful people who are out in the world doing work for the spirit world. And this evening, it's my absolute delight and pleasure to welcome the lovely Darren Brittain. How are you doing, Darren?
Yeah, I'm really, really well. Happy it's Friday, but I'm good. Thank you. Very good. Thanks for inviting me.
Lovely. I can't wait to get into this. I literally can't wait to get into your book and all the different things that we need to talk about this evening. So I'm just going to say hello to a couple of people that are on, and hello if you are here for the very first time. You're so welcome, and I'm so pleased that you found us in this corner of the internet. You're exactly where you need to be, and you're so welcome here. And hello to people who come week in, week out every Friday, are a really close family of this spiritual circle. Hello to lovely Linda Marie, the fabulous Neil Payne. How are you doing, Neil? Good to see you on here. Debbie, lovely Jamie, and Lorna, so pleased to have you with us. If you're here for the first time, you must make sure that you give StreamYard permission to see your name. Otherwise, we won't be able to see who you are. And please do feel free to leave a comment where you're from in the world. React, send your questions in for Darren to answer live. This is your opportunity to have a Q&A time with Darren. Very rare opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to it. Super. Oh my goodness. Partner. Hello, Adam Berry. How are you doing? You are online. Good evening, Adam. It's good to have you on with us. Amazing. So, ladies and gents, if you make yourself comfortable, we will be back in about 30 seconds time. We'll see you in just a moment. Okay, so everybody, thank you for joining us. If you've just joined, don't worry, everything is captured for a replay for you. So you can go right back to the beginning and watch it all over again forever and ever. It's saved on this Facebook page for you to go back and enjoy for the many weeks to come. Okay, so Darren, I kind of feel like I have a million questions for you. And for those people who haven't already had the pleasure of it, would you be able to just talk to us primarily about this amazing book that you have written, kind of birthed into the world, and just the reason why you wrote it? Because it's a bit of a different type of book, not your standard memoir. Why did you?
Yeah, I was really clear, and the book started about 12 years ago. This is not like an overnight thing. This has been, a long time in the making, and, several rewrites and several edits. But I think that my intent in writing the book was really, it wasn't ever going to be about the medium in the sense that, this is the message I've given, look at the communication I'm able to deliver. It was never, really about, the kind of mediumship itself, in that respect. But I was really clear that I wanted it to be helpful to students along the mediumistic journey and kind of pathway, really, because it is an incredibly, certainly very individual experience. Everybody's experience of the spirit world and how we interact is very unique. And I was very aware over the 28 years that I've been working as a medium that there are certain elements of my own development that I think were very common to many people. So I wanted to make reference to those within the book. And then so that the first part of the book is very much my experience to a degree, and certain elements that kind of came into my awareness that I think are very common to many mediums' journeys. And then the second part of the book, which is much more really about the unfoldment of mediumship and the elements, the inner and outer elements that are really vital if we want to understand our mediumship from an individual perspective. So I was really clear that it was kind of a challenge to have almost a memoir and also instructional book in one kind of copy. So it was an interesting process, and as you said, I gave birth to it to the world. It was painful, it was anxiety provoking, but I've really enjoyed it as well. Yeah.
It's just so, and you've encapsulated it beautifully. It's almost part memoir, part spiritual development workbook, really, for want of a better explanation. Yeah. And also it's a real guide there just to check in for anyone who's running development circles, running churches, or maybe somebody slightly further along their path as well, because you give some really open and frank discussions around some of the slightly thornier issues as well of spiritual development. You know, you put it all out there, and you're very honest, which is something that I find remarkable.
Yeah, really, and that seems to be something that people have really hooked into, is the fact that it's I say no holds barred. I mean, I don't want people to think that it is, you know, attacking or unkind to anybody, but it is very real. And I think, you know, one of the problems that we sometimes have, that certainly I face within this experience of the spiritual arena, is that people weren't always willing to tell the absolute truth about the experience of unfoldment. It was almost presented almost in a very love and light way. Certainly my experience of it was. But and yet my experience was very different from the love and light that I'm told that it would be for other people. So I wanted it to have a reality to it. And that seems to be an aspect of the book that's really hooked people in, and it's touched them, because it is a real experience. You know, it's not all love and light. That's the truth of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's really lovely. One of the kind of the taglines or the monikers that you've given is detail as your middle name, Darren. And I had the real pleasure of doing a workshop, a kind of a one-day kind of workshop with you many, many years ago in Bournemouth, where actually you made us work really hard on that evidential detail. And you give some beautiful examples in the book of ways that sometimes language can creep into this understanding, can creep into demonstrations, can creep into the vocabulary of a medium. And actually you bring it right back to evidence. And you give a beautiful example of, you know, our loved ones in spirit know the code word, and they know that significant memory. So why would they go all around the houses when actually they know what needs to be put across? And why am I using a checklist, a framework, when spirit know what they want to communicate? Would you be able to talk a little bit more about that, and kind of some of the things that you use when you're teaching your students, and kind of your approaches to the very evidential way that you deliver your mediumship?
Thank you. I think the really important thing to really hold on to in mediumship, of any level of understanding experience, is to allow ourselves to be led by the spirit world. That's really it. That's really keeping mediumship really simple, is that we don't need to teach the spirit world how to work. We don't need to teach them what to give. They come ready-made. They know what's necessary. All that we have to do is to listen and deliver what we experience, and really keeping it as simple as that, because many people try to complicate it, and many people will say, this is the format, this is the forum, this is the checklist, as you say. And the problem with any of those methods of teaching or methods of attaining evidence, or certain types of evidence, is that it becomes more about the medium and less about the spirit world. It becomes more about what you want as a medium, or it becomes more about what the organization we're part of wants or expects of us as a medium. And it becomes less about what the spirit people want to give. And I think if we just can listen to what the spirit world want to give, and give that, even if it seems to contradict or it's in contrast to the organization or the teacher, then tough, really. We've got to listen to the spirit world. And if we, you know, I think my experience in this arena has certainly shown me that there are many mediums who've had their mediumship diluted into mediocrity by having to make it conform to a structure. And if we can just listen to the spirit world, give it exactly as we get it, as we're told many times in circles, and trust that, then I think that's all we need to do as mediums. That's it. We just have to get out of the way. I'm a great fan. You know, in mediumship, I said this to somebody the other day, is that within mediumship, for that hour that we work, we have to work at losing ourselves. We have to work at losing our identity. So for that hour of the demonstration, Darren is not relevant. My prayer always before I work is, let them see you, not me. You know, because I want the spirit world to be evident. I don't want Darren to be evident. I want them to be evident. So for that hour that we work as mediums, we have to let go of our ego, let go of our identity, so that we can be moved by the spirit world and the presence can be evident without our interference. Now, outside of mediumship, when I'm not working for that hour, I work hard to understand who Darren is. You know, it's a really weird contrast, because I see a therapist, I do journal work, I sit and pray and I meditate and sit in the power and all those things to know who I am. But for the time that I'm working, I work to forget me. And that's the very interesting thing in development. It doesn't just finish when the service finishes.
Wow, goodness, that has just got so many light bulbs going off. I don't know how everyone else is feeling out there, but very, very so insightful, and it's just evident. I mean, some of the things that you reference, so many other faith paths and different knowledge and different spiritual teachers from all over, which just I think is testament to how many hard yards you've actually done and the work that's been put in. I wanted to ask you a question because it's something that came up in the book, and you use the term spiritualized, which I love. Yeah. You use that term as kind of a point in the map where it's beyond spiritual development and it's beyond learning how to be a medium. Could you describe what your understanding of that is when someone becomes spiritualized?
It's the recognition, and not just the recognition, but it's the working with and walking the path of recognizing that we are already spirit within a body, recognizing that we are already a soul here and now. And as such, we're already in the spirit world right now. We don't go anywhere. The only thing that happens is that the body drops away and we reveal to who we really are. So spiritualized in that context, to me, is about the recognition that we are spirit here and now, and that we can choose to lean into that understanding experience to become spiritual and become a demonstration of the spirit in our world. So that's what I mean by that, because Darren is not, this is my identity, but this isn't who I am. Ashley is your identity, but that isn't who you are. To spiritualize means to recognize and live who you truly are beyond the identity.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. So that is it's a different activation. It's a different thing to actually going along to a spiritualist development circle and learning how to become a medium. They're two, you see them as being two completely independent things.
Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing in development is that many people work to develop their mediumship, but they don't work to develop their spirituality. They don't work to develop the recognition that they are spirit themselves. They don't work to develop kindness or empathy or understanding or learning to listen, because that's the other thing. Empathy really is about being able to step into somebody else's shoes and really truly understand their experience. And we feel that within us. So mediumship, in a way, is a demonstration of empathy, because we're allowing in that glimpse, we're allowing the power of somebody else to move us and influence us so that we become a demonstration on their behalf. And so mediumship development's one part of the unfoldment process, but we've got to learn to develop empathy as another, because they've got to function together for it to be mediumship that's therapeutic. And rather than just getting, well, I got that bit right or I got that bit wrong, there's got to be a value beyond that. And I think that can only really truly be evident when we can develop and cultivate empathy within ourselves.
Wow, thank you. I love that idea. And yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you can have people who are really, really good mediums and yet may not have actually really looked that deeply in it. And then other people I know who are deeply spiritual, who would never call themselves mediums and actually have no wish or desire to develop that element within themselves. Yeah, that's beautifully put. Thank you. My goodness. Thank you for everyone that's joining us. There are so many people online. It's so lovely to have each and every one of you here with us. Hello to everyone who's just joining us. Don't worry, you haven't missed anything. Please do put your questions in, or if you want to come back and comment on anything that Darren is talking about this evening, there is going to be so much goodness in this. I have a question on that note. I was just about to say, where's Jamie Williamson's question? Jamie is known for his amazing questions. Here we go. Darren, do you think that the framework that is evident in many mediums' work and messages becomes operational on a subconscious level?
Yes.
Ooh, okay.
Absolutely. So when we're working in our mediumistic state, the subconscious part of the mind of the medium and the unconscious part is closer to the surface. And it's the part of us that often has all the stuff that our conscious mind tries to keep away, So it comes to the surface, and it sometimes comes up in our demonstrations. As an example, I remember giving a demonstration and feeling a really intense dislike of the recipient, which was not a communicated piece of information. It was something that it triggered within me. So there are parts of us as mediums that, as we take ourselves into the experience of mediumship, we can't ever fully be separate from it. So our stuff's going to come to the surface. Now, if as part of our stuff, we've adopted or identified with a framework that mediumship should be, then our mediumship and the mind will always make the awareness conform to it. So if you think you have to give this piece of information, this piece of information, this piece of information, initially that starts to become a very conscious request. You know, you're consciously requesting and reaching for that information. Once we fully identify with that, and often if we've had some really good results with that, we invest in that even more. And then what happens is the mind creates a format for the awareness to conform to, which is often why when you see mediums that give very much the same format, they always start with, I've got a man here that was 5'10", there's always a very formulaic way that the evidence is delivered. And that, I think, is not about the spirit world always doing it in that way. I think that the mind of the medium is making it conform to a framework that they've adopted that they feel works in some way. So I think it may start to become very conscious initially, but the more that we start to employ that and identify with that framework, eventually we don't need to think about it anymore. It starts to become much more, I guess, intuitive rather than ritualistic in that way. But it still creates the same outcome, very much the script of how it always is with every communicator. Wow.
Amazing question, Jamie. And you know what, again, more light bulb moments. And I'm just thinking actually about, it does become a bit like driving. You don't have to think about changing gear anymore because you just know that you're in that kind of body memory, aren't you? Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So thank you. Great question, Jamie. He's just come back to say, he's, sometimes we need to change it up and he's working hard to change that. Yeah. Great question. Thank you, Jamie.
Really good.
I had another amazing question. I have a whole page of things to talk to you about. We'll probably have to do it after we finish here. Want to get to as many questions as I can. The lovely Adam has asked about your religious beliefs, and I was going to talk about that as well. Really fascinating. If you're thank you.
Yeah, it's fascinating one because people always have this assumption that because you're a medium that you're a spiritualist, and I absolutely am not a spiritualist, and I'm very open about saying I'm not a spiritualist. And it isn't that I have anything objections about spiritualism, although there are a couple of things I disagree with within the principles that don't quite resonate with me. But my religious beliefs, I guess, it's always that kind of argument that's kind of raised, isn't it, about religion and spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think what I've realized is that the more you make your religious beliefs a part of your identity, the more cut off you are from the spiritual dimensions within yourself. And we see this a lot. The majority of religious people tend to be stuck at that level. They adopt an identity, they adopt the principles as an example, and they become that becomes them. Now that as a set of principles, guidelines, rules, whatever, works for them, and that's great. But because they identify with that, they make the mistake of believing that that's who they are. And so anything that comes along that challenges that or challenges them, because it feels personal when we start to identify with things, is that they will either turn away, reject, or they will attack it. So any new way of thinking becomes alien. And I guess this is probably on a bigger level why we have lots of arguments and wars around the world. But so for that reason, I choose not to identify with a religious belief. I choose to identify with being kind. I choose to identify with empathy. I choose to not identify with things that stifle my ability to connect with the spiritual dimensions within myself. So in effect, I guess in a really simple way of putting that, I need to keep my mind free. I need to keep my mind free. And if I identify with a religious belief system, then there's a degree that, again, back to Jamie's question, the mind will make my awareness and my perception of the spiritual world conform. And I don't want it to be influenced in that way. So so that's my religious belief, is I kind of have an absence of them. Yeah.
Marvelous question. And again, just such a lovely, well-rounded answer. Thank you so much. Goodness, you are coming up with some amazing questions.
Love it.
But saying that, it's really evident in the book when you talk about prayer. And in fact, you put a lovely post on your social media. I think it was either today or yesterday, that the only true prayer there is help. And I'd add to that and say the only other prayer there is thank you and help.
Yes.
The only two prayers that there are. Could you just talk about the presence of prayer and kind of that quietness and within your life? You've already talked about sitting in the power, but is that a big part of your spiritual experience?
It is. I always call it the DSP, the daily spiritual practice. We all need one, and it's that thing that we lean into where we sometimes need the reminder of we are a spiritual being having this human experience. And I think whether we lean into prayer to bring us that, or we lean into meditation to bring us that, whatever we can do to, I guess, reminders of our spiritual identity, then I think that's important. But for me, prayer is not just a way of, asking a question and getting an answer. I think for me, what I'm learning, and I'm still not there yet, but what I'm learning as I'm unfolding is that we are the prayer. We are the prayer. We're the thing that we might ask for in prayer, we have to be. And, and I think that's what I'm learning to recognize, is because if I'm sitting here sending a request to something outside of me, then I'm denying the fact that I am that God that I'm praying to. And I think that's what's vital to understand, is that God is not separate to us, because that's again, that whole religious and spirituality division. So I think for me, prayer is about a conscious recognition that I am God here and now. And I don't mean the God in a religious way, but I mean that I am as powerful as that power is. And as it moves through me, then that's me in a state of prayer. And so I guess that would be my answer to that, if that does answer it at all. Yeah,
it's a fab answer, and there's so many of my beloved interfaith friends who are on here, and I know that they will absolutely be mwah, mwah, mwah. What a lovely answer. Thank you so much for that. Amazing. So going back to the book, we're going to come back to your questions. Do not worry, people at home. We are going to come back to your questions. There are literally so many questions, which we will get to. Debbie, we will get to your question, definitely. I just wanted to very quickly go back to kind of going back to real basics. And you talk about people asking the question, when you ask them, why do you want to be a medium? And the answer that comes back to say, I want to help people. And yes. I love the way you put this, that we're asking the wrong question, and people may not be giving the answer that is in true service. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I found that just like, because I've been saying that for years. I just want to help. I just want to help people.
Well, see, that's what I said earlier, about the fact that, for the time that we're working, we have to really work at removing us. So when we talk about, I want to help people, we're already involving ourselves in that process. And what we're also saying is that my version of help, what I'm offering you, whether it be my connection, the type of evidence I deliver, my kindness, whatever, there's a part of that that is still about us. And one of the things that happens with that is that when we involve ourselves, we tend to get very aligned with an outcome, or we have a perception of what we want the outcome to be. And so if we say to somebody, I want to help you, and that person doesn't say, I feel helped, where does that leave you as the worker? Because it also suggests that you have an attachment to an outcome. You have a desire to see something happen. And I'm sure as I do, you may well do a reading for somebody or do a demonstration and walk out the room, and you really never know the impact of your words on somebody. And sometimes people are really kind and they'll come and say, that was really meaningful and thank you very much. And other times people just walk out, you never hear from them again. So I think the definition of service is to give without need for reward. And I don't mean the reward financially necessarily of this. I think that when we become attached to an outcome, then I think there's a part of us that's already involved. And whilst we're involved, the mind isn't free. And the mind needs to be free in mediumship. So we almost have to do it for the sake of expressing the power within us. That's literally it, without needing it to do anything or wanting it to achieve a certain result. It's just do it because it's an expression of who you are. It's an expression of your soul. Do it for that reason. And if people get helped, wonderful. And if people don't get helped, it's still what it was needed to be. So it's a very noble thing, and I really don't want anybody to hear this thinking you should go into your mediumship thinking, I don't want to help anybody. I'm saying don't. I think it was actually Eileen Garrett that said, do not get attached to the outcome. And I think that is such an empowering thing in mediumship, especially because the nature of mediumship is that validation is kind of such a huge part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Did I get that wrong? So I think because of that, we tend to, I think, assess the quality of our mediumship from an external perspective. How many yeses did I get? How many no's did I get? When really it should be that it's really about the expression of the soul. The mediumship is a power within the soul. And really the reward, if there is one, is about the fact that it gets to be heard. It gets to be heard. That's it. And if we can do that, and, you know, we all get affected by no's, and we can all get very affected by yeses. But I think we've got to be really clear about what our role is as mediums. It isn't about helping people. If people get helped, some people cannot be helped. That's the truth of it. Some people cannot be helped. And it isn't our job to heal the world. It's only our job to identify with who we truly are and be a demonstration of that in the world. And that will speak for itself.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Hopefully that has affected everyone that's listened to that as much as you posing that question in your book, and then it caused so much internal reflection. Because you're absolutely right. We get kind of programmed from the very moment you sit in your very first development circle. We just kind of get almost force-fed and brought up on that yes-no dynamic, and it becomes all about that, and that is your validation of the success or not success.
Assess it. Yeah, you're right. We don't assess the quality of our mediumship or our connection from an internal perspective now. We look at it from the outside. How many yeses did I get? How many bookings have I got? How many people are in the room? You know, we assess our worth as mediums or our value as mediums from an external perspective. And we've really got to include really and make priority. What are we feeling in our connection? How close can we feel to the other world? That's the only thing we need as a barometer of our connection, is how do we feel within us in the presence and the power? So that's the thing we need to get back to, I think, and really withdraw from the outer world and all the things that it can do to seduce us into making us believe that we are a certain medium person, whoever. Yeah.
Wow. Wonderful. Oh my goodness. So inspiring, and lots and lots of things to think about here. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm going to put down the big list of questions I've got, which have come up for me as light bulb moments from reading your book. And Lorna Gray loves that point. Success and failure has become how we judge our abilities. Yes, Lorna, you are absolutely.
And they move us.
That's resonating.
They move us. You know, they move us in our mediumship because they involve the mind again. You know, how do we feel when we hear somebody say no 3 times? We die inside. There's a little bit of part of us that we end up in a puddle on the floor, you know, and we can feel it. We know it. It alters our consciousness if we let it, because we have this idea about worth. You know, we equate yeses and nos to worth, and then that stuff really will start to tear us apart. So yeah, absolutely right. We do mislabel those things. We give meaning to them when really we shouldn't. Yeah.
Wow. This is the kind of straightforward, straight talking, actually, that takes you outside of yourself and looks at that helicopter view to say, what are we actually trying to do here? Which I really appreciate. So thank you. And Jamie loves where you're coming from, Darren. So we're loving the
Thanks for being here.
feet on the ground honesty. Amazing. I'm going to get back to Debbie's question. She's asking the question about how your journey. I know how your journey began, which is not the conventional route. Do you want to give us a précis? I'm not going to take anything away from your book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So most people, when you say to people, how did you begin? You know, you invariably hear stories of a lot of mediums talk about the fact that they would play with spirit children. They would see things from a very young age. They were brought up with mediumship, you know, and I think that's phenomenal in itself. I think for me, I never had any spiritual kind of leanings or understanding or experience. I went to church only when it was Sunday school, when they were making food. That was a great lure for me as a child, that we could make cinder toffee. And so I didn't go for Jesus. I didn't go for the church. I went for food. But that was my only real kind of link with the spiritual realm, if you like. And then I started becoming unwell around about 14. And I had these terrible headaches that were preceded by these visual disturbances. Now, I talk about this more deeply in the book and what was going through my awareness at that time. But it took a long time for these kind of headaches, migraines to become resolved. And so when they finally were, I was still left with this ability to see light around people. And it was a little bit like the Ready Brett glow. You know, remember the advert years ago where there was somebody that had eaten porridge and they were glowing, and it would look like that to me. And yet over a period of time, I learned that certain colors meant certain things. I could feel that intuitively. And I would sit, usually when I was daydreaming. So if I was in maths at school, because I wasn't really a fan of maths, I would kind of drift away. And I'd find that my friend Martin in front of me would look a little bit like there'd be a color around him, or there'd be a form around him. And I just learned that if I focused on those things, I would start to experience within me feelings and thoughts that I knew were not my own. And then I and I also, this is a time, I think I say in the book, when my soul opened up and woke up, is that I remember waking up, nothing had happened that day. There was nothing that had preceded it. I was already at that point learning to be an electrician. I was at college 1 day a week, and this day was a Monday, which was my college day. And I woke up and thought, I need to understand the paranormal. I need to understand what's going on. I need to understand this other dimension that I'd never experienced and never really believed in, if I'm honest with you. And so I went to the college, as usual, and the main library in Doncaster was opposite Doncaster College at that time. So I just went in the break and started to look at books, and some of them talked about auras, which is clearly what I was experiencing, and some of them talked about spiritualist churches, and there just happened to be one in the next village. So that was the next thing on my list. So that was really how it began. I mean, obviously, I talk about what happened in the spiritualist church and my thoughts and feelings about the craziness that I thought was going on there. But it became an incredibly pivotal moment in my awareness starting. Yeah.
Wow. You've got to go and get the book. To answer your question, it's called From Innocence to Innocence, which is probably one of the catchiest titles that have got to be in a book that's been released. It's very, very good. Highly recommended. So do go and get that. In fact, I'll drop a little link into your website for people to be able to go and find that. Just put that in the chat for everybody to be able to go and find. All of Darren's information is on his website. Bookings, where he's going to be, how to get in touch, and also how to purchase Darren's book will be on his website. Amazing. Goodness me. Okay, we've got some more questions coming in for you. Let me just scroll back. There's been so many comments and so many questions. Thank you. Let's have a look. Oh, it scrolled off the bottom of the page. I'm going to go to one of mine. So getting into the nuts and bolts, and I'm so excited because I'm kind of at this section in the book. Could you just talk in a little bit more detail? You talked about this kind of conditions, the internal and the internal and the external conditions for all of the budding mediums that are out there and people sitting to develop. Could you talk us through that, because it is just genius how you break it down?
Okay, thank you. So it really came about because my grandfather was a beautiful gardener. He used to grow roses, and one side of his garden was completely like front to back in roses. And as a child, I was always really fascinated that these roses all looked beautiful, different colors, different shapes, different smells, and yet they all started in exactly the same way, this very tight, dark green bud. And as a kid, inquisitive, curious, nosy, I would, to my granddad's dislike, rip off the head of the bud and really carefully try to undo so I could see what was in it. And every single time this fell to pieces, because obviously the flower wasn't ready to open and it needed certain elements to be able to do so. And I think what I realized moving throughout this mediumistic journey is that we are a little bit like that flower, that it needs certain elements to be able to flourish. And if we try to make it, we try to force it to conform, as we've talked about already, it starts to damage the way that it could naturally unfold. And so the inner conditions are the elements of us as mediums that are really important that we get in harmony and we're clear about our operating in the right way, or in a way that is supportive of mediumship, not necessarily the right way, but supportive of it. So we have the mind, the power, the connection, and the breath. They're the elements that are our responsibility to make sure that our mind is behaving itself, that it's not interfering with the process and getting involved. The power, that we are identifying with who we truly are as a spiritual being, and we're allowing the power to be evident through us and allowing the power to fuel our awareness. The connection, because unless you're connecting with the spirit world, whatever you want to call it, there has to be a connection to the other world before you can say you're a medium, Well, if you have to be connected to somebody, a person, a place, or a thing, if you want to define yourself as a psychic. So connection's really important, that we recognize the difference between those two states. And also breath, because our breath is linked to our consciousness. You think about the times that you're really anxious, you breathe very differently from the times when you're really calm and relaxed and, meditative or sitting in the power or in prayer. So our breath is linked with our consciousness. And I think Eileen Garrett talked about this as well, is about the arousal of the mind influences our breath. So they're the elements within us as mediums that are our responsibility, that we can modify them, alter them, affect them, change them in a way that is supportive of the experience of mediumship. Mm-hmm. The outer elements are where that can all fall down. The outer elements are the elements that have a potential, and only a potential, to influence the inner experience, the inner conditions. So the outer experience, and I give in the book examples of these things so that you get to really understand a little bit more about what I mean by them. But the outer conditions are people, those beautiful recipients that are difficult, stroppy, unkind, unloving, divine children of God, cleverly disguised as difficult people. So people, the language we use is also another external condition. Our delivery, or our expression rather, and the environment. The environment that we're in has a potential to influence our inner experience. So I talk about those elements much more in depth in the book. But regardless of whether you are an evidential medium or a physical medium or a trance medium, those elements are inherent within the experience of mediumship. And they're the things that I break down in the book. That's the second part that's much more about the unfoldment of mediumship, the development of the self, really, that I think are really vital within the mediumistic process.
Yeah, thank you. The way you break it down is really interesting, because you simplify it and you take some of not the grace out of it, and not the presence of the divine and the presence of the spirit, but you take some of the mystique out of it, and some of maybe some of the things that have not been talked about before. And so that's why, there are some books that really stick out in your memory that have been written many, many years ago, a lot of them by some people who really do break down the mechanics of mediumship for you. But what I love is it's so up to date and so modern, and in language that people can understand, because some of those books can be a real barrier to people because of the language they were written in, like nearly 100 years ago. And people aren't in the same place. People don't have the same needs and the same internal stuff going on.
No, and the truth is as well, Ashley, without diminishing the book that I've just birthed to the world, is that that's a snapshot of where my conscious is right now. And as we evolve as people, as students, because we're all students of the world, really, as we evolve, so does the phenomena of our mediumship. So one thing we always have to do is to keep our mind open and be willing to learn and be willing to challenge those held beliefs that we've had. So whilst this book is very current and very fresh and very modern and very, very relevant to now, in 20 years' time, there may be other elements that I have yet to explore and uncover that I'm not fully aware of in this moment. So I think we've always got to keep a part of us that's willing to search and challenge and explore. And I think, our mediumship will then start to unfold, and the phenomena will develop as we do. Because that's always where development should be, is on the vessel, on the medium, never on the spirit world. It's always on us.
Wonderful. Thank you. How's your mediumship changed since you first took your very first steps onto a platform to deliver? I know that you've obviously been through a process, but how has it changed, and how are you feeling it's going?
Honestly, I would say, like every medium, I can come home from a demonstration or a service and think, okay, I should have kind of handled that differently. I could have worked on that element of evidence. I could have focused on that. Why didn't I give that? I'm still have those moments. I'm less unkind to myself now than I used to be. Because I think we go through that kind of whole self-flagellation thing of, I should have done this, but so I reflect, and in my process of reflection, I look at, okay, was it something going on within me, within the inner conditions? Was it something external that I allowed to influence me? So in a way, at the beginning, there's something incredibly beautiful about the fact when you know nothing, your mind is at its freest. So I would say for myself, I would say that I felt the presence of the spirit world much more tangibly back then, because it was in its rawest form, and there was nothing in my mind to make it conform. It just was its most pure. And I think, because now I teach, there's something about the fact that now when I'm working, I'm also aware of the different parts of me that are present. I'm aware of the process more than I ever have been. And in some respects, there's a part of that keeps me more present than it ever did right at the beginning. So that's the change. I think I'm more able to move myself into the experience more now than I ever was. But it's still work in progress. I still come home and sometimes think, you know what, I could have done a bit better there. I could have handled that better. So, and I don't ever want to change that, because that's really how we grow, isn't it?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. What a great answer. Thank you. Neil agreed. Yeah, Neil's talking about just perpetual student of the spirit and always learning and always developing. I just wanted to point out a really lovely comment from Cheryl. Cheryl, it's been a very long time, dear friend, since we've seen you. How lovely to have you with us this evening. And she's feeling so inspired by this, just so ignited, feeling the spirit and the soul rise as a result of this conversation, to carry on that journey of spiritual development. So I suppose on that note, knowing that we're evolving and kind of moving forward, how do you kind of have the intuition or the feeling of mediumship, how it may potentially be in the future? We've been through a massive period of change in the last 6 months, how we do everything.
Absolutely.
What's your kind of thoughts as a teacher, seeing people come through and different types of students? What are your kind of thoughts on the future of this work?
I think whilst ever there is grief, there will always be a need for mediumship. While ever there is a belief that the spirit world or that there's a separation that death creates, there's always going to be a need for mediumship, without question. I think what I would hope to see is that when people have received that evidence of their loved one's continuation of life, that they then stop looking to the outside for more of it, that they stop looking for another medium, another sitting, another communication, another contact. And instead, they start to look at that spiritual identity of themselves. Then what, because if they've survived and they're an eternal being, then so must I be. And so I would hope that people, because I think mediumship is a signpost to the soul. I think it gives people the opportunity to say that there's something more to you. There's something more to this. And I guess my hope would be that people will really hear that and respond to that, rather than getting stuck in this loop or this groove of, I need that to feel better, I need that to make me more, I need that to feel close to. So I would hope that would change. But I also am very aware of the power of grief, and I'm very aware of that need within us when we are in that place of absence and loss, and that there's a need to reconnect. So yes, I don't know. I think that what will change, and I in some respects hope will change, is that people rely less on religion, that people will rely less on institution, people will rely less on the framework that we are told mediumship should conform to. I would hope that people will learn to identify with themselves as a spiritual being rather than a religious being. And that then, through that identification process, will make change happen. That's what I would hope for.
Wow, amen to that. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Such wonderful thoughts. Thank you. I just want to say hello to lovely Cecilia that's joined us. And Cecilia, I know that your heart and your soul will be singing when you hear that lovely sentiment from Darren. Wonderful. Thank you. Amazing question that's come in from Jamie. Jamie, your questions are literally off the chain. Brilliant how you follow these chains of thoughts, Jamie. You're talking about, just wanted to come back on the point of almost that natural mediumship and how you balance that progress of understanding the self with not losing the intuitiveness of that natural mediumship. And any tips? How do you do it, Darren? How do you manage to do that? Almost keep
my gosh. Okay.
camp. So, how do you manage it?
Oh, I think Jamie, you're challenging me there, which is great. I love it. It is. So give me a second. Let me just kind of feel into that, and let me just feel what my kind of response is. I guess the simple answer is to stay present. I think that's the thing, is that in this moment, I have an understanding based on who I am and where I am right now. And as that changes and as we evolve, then that's going to change as well. So I think that the key to spiritual development is always about identifying yourself as a spiritual being. And that's a constant. That is a constant. I think the challenge that we will always have is that when we sit in that power and we invite that power into our experience, one of the things that it also does is it seeks to bring to the surface anything unlike itself. It will bring to the surface those parts of the vessel that need healing, that need attention. So, when we invite God into our world, when we invite love into our experience, and I think the quote that I have at the back of the book is a Rumi quote, which is like, do not seek love, seek to identify those things within you that are barriers against it. I think one thing about development is when we call that power in, it's going to bring things to the surface unlike itself. And so if we can choose to lean into the discomfort of that, because it will be uncomfortable, and, you know, we are all, you know, living in difficult times, and we've all got stuff that we're going to die that's not going to be healed. That's the truth of it. But if we can lean into that discomfort and choose to look at that as part of our spiritual unfoldment and progression, then I think everything we ever experience is about the progression of the spirit. Everything, however uncomfortable and painful it might feel, has within it a potential to, I guess, take us higher. Yeah. I think that's the thing. And if we can recognize, and I'm talking about this now feeling very calm and relaxed. Trust me, when I'm in my drama, this goes out the window for a moment, you know, I just need a refresher. But I recognize there is a power, and I recognize now more so that in that state of drama or stress or pain, that I can lean into that power within me to help me get through it. And that's something I never had at the beginning. I didn't recognize fully how incredibly nurturing and loving that power is. And I often talk about this in our work, is that just letting the spirit hold us is an incredibly intimate healing experience. And I think that's what I would say, if that does answer Jamie's question. I think there are lots of different parts to that, but I think that there is no separateness between mediumship and spiritual unfoldment. I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that if we lean into the power of the soul, and mediumship is a natural aspect of the soul's potential, then it becomes expressed anyway, without us having to work on it. It becomes very much in its own naturalness, because the soul's desire is to express itself in the world. So I think if we can choose to look at and identify with every experience that has a spiritual element, component, progressive part to it, then nothing can really take us down. It's only ever designed to take us higher.
My goodness. Oh, this feels like such a blessing and such a gift to be able to have you sat in front of us like this, to ask the questions that you never really get to ask unless you're on an intensive one-to-one or a workshop or a kind of a program with you. These are questions, and that's why I love these Friday nights, is you get to ask mediums that have the accumulated body of work that some of these spiritual people such as yourself, Darren, have accumulated over the years by doing the really hard work. And putting it into such eloquent terms for us is just such a gift. Thank you.
And it's also good for me. It's also a blessing for me, because these are questions that I don't often get asked. And so it gives me an opportunity to really, as I'm speaking, really affirm for myself what my beliefs and thoughts and experiences are. Because it's one of those things we kind of think we know ourselves, but it's only when we put ourselves out there and take the risk of people shooting us down that we think, okay, no, I'm clear on that. I'm clear on who I am. And so that it's as much a gift to me as you're saying it's a gift to you as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to all the people of joining us and people sharing and sending this out and sending this wisdom and this light out into the world. And that's exactly how it should be. It should be the ripples upon the ripples upon the ripples. So thank you for that. Thank you to Jackie. Hello, Jackie from hello, how are you doing, Jackie? From Bournemouth. Lovely to have you. I have a question which is coming from Susan, and I'm not going to take too much away from it, but she's talking about spirit guides. And this is a question that I know comes up quite a lot. And you probably answered this a lot. What's your kind of take on spirit guides? And it's kind of the question that all working mediums get. So kind of what's your take, Darren?
Well, I think there's a couple of different trains of thought that I have with this. So let's first of all accept that if we can accept that we are a spiritual being, that our soul is on a journey, and in this journey it's taken the form of Darren, it's taken the form of Ashley, but it is a soul is on its journey, then I wonder sometimes when we have these moments of guidance that come, you know, from what we believe a spirit guide, is that they're not always from an external discarnate spiritual being. That I wonder sometimes what happens is in that moment of darkness, in that moment of needing care, support, love, nurture, we tap into that power within us that has a multitude of experiences, a multitude of memories, maybe a multitude of incarnations, that it then, presents in that moment wisdom from that source. So it's an inspirational, because again, that's really the nature of inspiration, is the word is in spirit, isn't it? So it's within the spirit within us. So I think that sometimes the spiritual guide is not a discarnate external spiritual being, although I accept that they are there as well. But I also think that one of the things we get hung up on is needing to know the identity of it before it can become real to us. And that also suggests that that spiritual guide is only just one soul. And I think that there are an army of souls that are benevolent and kind, that are helping us, that maybe we see one face, but there are many faces. So yeah. I think, you know, I've lived in this apartment for almost 5 years now. I've seen my postman every single day. You know, I think he's called John, but I'm not sure. But what matters to me is he brings my mail. That's what matters. And I trust him to do that. And I trust that I will get what I need to get through that. Whether I like that mail or I want that mail, he's doing his job. And I don't interfere in that process. Nor do I need to know his family background, his ethnicity, how many children he's got, where he lives. That stuff isn't relevant to the role that he has adopted. So I'm not denying spirit guides. I think it's an area that we need to really look at and explore more on an individual basis, because I think that's the truth of it, is that my experience of the other world and my experience of my spiritual workers will be and should be very different to everybody else's. And I think the thing to just add on to that is, if we accept that a spiritual guide is a highly evolved, enlightened being, why does it need to come back and bring an identity? Why does it need to come back and bring a face? It doesn't. We need that. So it begs the question, is it really a Tibetan monk? Or is that just the face that we've given it? Or is that just the mask that we've given it? So I think it's something that we really got to look at. And I mean, look at it from an experiential perspective, you know, as experiencing that for ourselves, rather than being told that a guide does a certain job and they live on the 7th level and that 7th level is purple. I think that again, it's moving into this very formulaic, ritualistic, limited thinking. And we start to identify with those things. And as we identify with it, we disconnect from the spiritual dimension slightly, because it becomes about what we think and the framework that we've created for it, rather than an experience of truth, wisdom, and a recognition on a soul level that we're being helped and held.
Yeah. My goodness, I kind of feel like there needs to be a one-off special around spirit guides and that whole conversation, because you're right, once you actually start to unpick it and you ask one question, it leads to more questions. And yet it probably is the number one thing that gets asked more by people in readings, and also every time we do any kind of Q&A. So thank you, Susan, for asking that question, because every medium that has been on here and every spiritual worker and every spiritual teacher has had a different view on it. And so you're right, it's a deeply personal thing, deeply personal.
And that's a blessing and also a curse, isn't it? When you listen to so many different people, is because it's so individual, your experience will not conform to that, and it shouldn't. But what we tend to do is, if it's somebody that we like that's telling us, or somebody that's got a position that's telling us, or if you've written a book or you've been on TV, then we tend to invest in that and believe that they know more than we do, and we discount our own experience. And that's really important, that we learn to listen to what people say to us, but listen from our intuition. Does that feel right? Because then your intuition, you're learning something through that sense. And that's the really important bit to maintain, is that stay connected to what you feel in the presence of any information, really. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just that constant checking in, isn't it? Constant, like you say, it all comes back to that present. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's literally chiming in on that. To Molly, it's really lovely to have you with us, Molly. Hello. Couldn't agree more with what you've said around spirit guides and kind of opening that whole discussion pot. Amazing. And thank you to everybody who is sending questions in. We're not going to be able to get to all of your questions, unfortunately, but I'm sure go back through the comments and questions, and if there's anything really burning, we'll do our very best to get back to that. So if anyone has any further points of ways of getting hold of Darren, I have put his email address further up in the chat, so please do go and check that out. And for anyone that has missed it, the amazing book, it's a mirror, isn't it, Darren? Look at this. From Innocence. Yeah. A really, really worthwhile book, very, very worthwhile getting. Certainly it's raised an awful lot of questions and given me so many ideas, whether you're brand new into this, you're in your developmental pathway, or actually you're maybe a little bit more into your developmental pathway. It's such a good check back in. Thank you. I'm not going to give away all of the things in that book, but there are moments of drama. There are some really deep personal reflections and some hard lessons around boundaries and working and all of that stuff. It's a very, very beautiful book. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I suppose I wanted to just leave the last word with you, Darren, before we pack up. I literally feel like we could be going for hours and hours more. If you had some advice for somebody who is looking to make that step from sitting in circle, they're getting yeses, they're getting their evidence validated, hopefully, and they're feeling the spirit, and they're looking to kind of deepen and strengthen their connection to spirit, how would you recommend they kind of progress? How would you recommend that they go forward?
There are so many different levels to that question, and there are so many different answers that won't give you one definitive result. I think what I would say more than anything is to cultivate within you and find within you who you are spiritually, find your spiritual identity, find what you really believe in, that's your belief, that's your experience, not what your teacher told you it should be and how it should conform. I think really search yourself to find who you are. I would also say as well, use every opportunity to take you higher, every experience, every sitting, every demonstration, practice, and use those experiences to help you understand how your mediumship works. That's really important. I would say keep a diary. And that's one thing I regret not doing is I didn't keep my diaries. I didn't keep my diaries because I think, those moments when we think, you know what, I'm not very good at this. I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. I need a break from this. I think look at the body of work that you've done, and because I think it is an incredibly challenging pathway at times, and it's a really lonely pathway at times. I know I'm not probably selling it very well to those that want to do the work, but nobody tells you this at mediumship school. Nobody tells you it's going to be really difficult. And it's really important to know that it is going to be difficult at times. But what you will cultivate and understand is that the power within you will hold you and support you throughout. And there is nothing that you could ever do or be or say that would make the other world love you any less. And I think if we can hold on to that, is that however we beat ourselves up, the other world will not. However we will judge the quality of our message, the quality of our evidence, the other world will not. I think if we can hold that throughout all of our mediumistic unfoldment and beyond, then I think we will find a level. Because I think what we find in unfoldment, it is like this. It's like this, and we've all gone through it, and we all go through it. And 28 years on, I still have my moments of that as well. But what I know is that I can call upon something higher in those moments, and that supports me through them. So I would say that stay connected to who you are on a spirit, find who you are, sit with who you are, and be led by the spirit world. Be led by them. And if you need to, because that's the other thing, it will annoy people. It will annoy people when you choose to listen to the spirit world over the teacher. It really does anger people. They don't like being made wrong. People don't, we assume that teachers have worked on themselves enough to go beyond feeling rejected and hurt, but it's out there. But we have to learn to listen to the spirit world above all else. That would be my parting message to everybody. Be guided by that power.
Words. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Madge. She said real food for thought. Goodness, that is. And what genius thought about the diary, actually. And do you know what? We all do it when we start off, don't we? When we first start sitting in circle, say, write down everything you get every week and, make a note of it. But actually, how often do we go back and refer to that and just relive the joy of the first time that someone goes, yeah, I think that was my granddad. And you go, what? Wow, amazing.
Because it brings a reality to it. And I think that's it. In those moments when we're feeling like, can I do this? Should I do it? It's because we've lost touch with our spiritual reality, that it is real. And we need sometimes something just to remind us of that. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. My goodness, so many gems, so many jewels and treasures just contained within this hour. And I can't wait to go back. Now you've explained some of the bits in here. I'm going to go back with a different frame of reference to go back and read it.
Thank
Do
you.
read the book, absolutely, Susan. The link is further up in the chat for Darren's website to go and order it. You can also buy it, I think, through large internet reseller. Other booksellers are available.
Yes. Can't say that word, but yes, that's exactly right.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who has been on, and there's so many of you that have been on this evening. It really does do my heart good to know that there is this real hunger for creating this safe space to have this real learning about these really open questions with people who are so generously giving their time, such as yourself, Darren. It's been an absolute
pleasure.
joy.
It's a joy. Thank you. And thank you for all you're doing, because this just doesn't happen, does it? You know, so thank you for all you're doing to make it, to put the light out there.
You're welcome. You are welcome. So, folks, this has come to the end of our spiritual circle for this evening. Back next Friday. Do come and join us there. And all of Darren's details are further in the chat to go and check him out on the website. Whatever you're up to, have a safe weekend. Look after yourselves. And we will see you next week. Keep spreading the light. Keep spreading those ripples. And thank you so much for joining us. See you later. Cheerio, everybody. Thank you, Darren. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.